across the world. You can see that map there, scattered all over the globe. And in the age of AI and in the age of technology, we're all connected in a single room today, which is a very special experience for me personally, and I hope everyone here enjoys it equally. Joining us live from Switzerland in Lausanne is Venitra Swami, my team and I in Cape Town, and all of us connected by Passkey. I wanted to say, I don't know what the pronoun is for Passkey, but it, this technology that binds all of us and all of our thoughts in this course. Please do say hi with an emoji and a reminder that you can turn them off in the top right corner there where the 3 little dots are if they become a distraction for you. This is our cohort, Vinny, 300 participants from across the world, all of them taking the time to be with us here today, and we appreciate you all and the efforts and the work you've put in so far on day 3 of this Agentic AI Intensive. But before we begin, just a quick reminder that cameras and microphones are automatically switched off. For Q&A, please do use the chat function. Vinny's got eyes on that, and I will coordinate towards the end when we get to the sort of more substantial questions, but throughout, please do put your thoughts in the chat and then respond with emojis to any questions Vinny might have, as well as a reminder there of the mute option. As always, some housekeeping for any technical issues. Please do refresh your browser. We are a tech course using a tech platform. Refresh works every time. Reach out to the support on the support icon in the bottom right, where Adrian will catch your query should you get stuck. And if something unexpected happens, we'll communicate with you over email, probably from Andre at htslcourses.org, which is the main communications channel on this course. So what have you done so far? We're starting Learning Unit 2. Before that, we explored the future of work with Miguel yesterday, a very interesting lecture talk there from Miguel. Following on from that, you learned how the shift towards an agent-first organizations is transforming how humans and AI collaborate. And then you started defining your agentic AI vision in that one-to-one AI build component that completed Learning Unit 1. And all of that summarized in a Wrapping Up Learning Unit 1 podcast first thing this morning. So where are we now? Thursday, December 4th, the start of the second learning unit. And I'm sure in this intensive, that Friday block is looking incredibly lucrative there, a single activity, not much happening tomorrow, and also equally so Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, allowing you some time to catch up, to get back to the work, to get back to the recordings as we move into Learning Unit 3 on Tuesday. For today's live session, my welcome is basically over. Then I'll hand over to Vinny for a hands-on agentic AI prototyping session. And then we'll do questions and closing towards the end, aiming to end on time to be respectful of everyone's time. But before I hand over to Vinny, a quick note on Scholar AI. This amazing platform, Vinny, that you mentioned in the beginning, personalized learning, much like our platform, but going into the foundations and the specifics of the sort of underpinnings behind agentic AI. And there's 5 courses, I believe, that are available to our participants, one on agents, one on RAG systems, context engineering, responsible AI, as well as workflow automation. So please do explore that. And Vinny loves being in touch and loves connecting. So team@scholar.ai is definitely an email address that will get a response. And with that, welcome Vinny to today's session. Introducing Vinny, she's CEO and co-founder of Scholar AI, a human-centered AI researcher and CEO of Scholar AI, as I just mentioned, an edtech spin-off focused on AI for education. She holds a PhD in computer science from EPFL. I will spare all of us the embarrassment of trying to pronounce that in French, which was recognized as a rising star in data science and received multiple awards for her contributions to machine learning and education research. Vinny, with that, welcome, and I will hand over to you. You now have control of the screen.
Amazing. Super nice to see all of you guys. Let me just share my screen. All right. I think we are here. Perfect.
Okay.
Well, fantastic to meet you all. I'm Venitra, and Andre just gave a very kind introduction of who I am. I'm coming from the Bay Area originally, so I grew up a bit around all of this from Cupertino a long time ago. I did my bachelor's and master's at Berkeley, then spent a few years at Microsoft AI, then ended up teaching at both Berkeley and the University of Washington towards machine learning, and then ended up doing my PhD. So been around in this field, I guess, for a bit, and seen a lot of different companies and worked at a few of them, especially towards AI. So super happy to answer any questions, both from the academic context of AI research as well as industry implementation. But now, as Andre's mentioning, we are working on a new startup towards how we can do personalized education at scale, especially in the context of hands-on exercises. So super excited to hear what you think of the platform as well. But getting into the nitty-gritty of what we're getting into today, you might have foreshadowed a little bit of this framework called the agent framework. I think some of your other lecturers are going to talk about this a bit more, especially the folks from Dane. And this is all about how you can frame your thinking around agents, which is a fairly new concept in this area. And it makes a lot of sense. So what you will see later in the following lectures is how to think about your own workflows, how to map them into agentic processes, then how to create agents, and then how to measure, navigate, and track, essentially, once you deploy an agent, what happens afterwards. And so what we are talking about today is a little bit around the engineer phase. But the reason that we're doing it first is that we think it's really, really important that you see concrete examples and workflows of what exactly agents are, how you can personally implement them. And we'll go through a number of them today, just like pure implementation of agents together, such that you see, one, how easy it is to do this, that you can definitely do it. The second, to understand what kind of is possible. And I think this will help frame, hopefully, the rest of your time in this intensive to understand, hey, I know that we have that building block. So I know that this is something that we can do. So that's where we are. That's where we're going. And just to get us all on the same page in terms of vocab. First off, what is an agent? I'm sure you've heard about this already. But the way that I like to think about it, and the way that the definition is a bit from the research community, is that it's something where you perceive a situation, right? Like it's a automated way to perceive a situation and then take an action accordingly. And the easiest way that I think of an agent is, for example, a smart thermometer, right? Essentially, when the temperature is too low, it perceives it, and then it decides to turn on the heater. Or the temperature is too high, it perceives it and decides to put on the AC. And that is basically the bare bones of what an agent is. Something that perceives, has some logic about it, and then takes actions based on it. Now, there are some other words that might come up throughout the course of this. One, how many of you know what RAG is? Wait, actually, maybe I will pull you to the side. Okay, perfect. Pretty much a lot of people, and some people say no. Okay, great. Whoop. Let me put this back up. Okay, perfect. Now I can see your thumbs up and downs. So I'll go over it briefly. RAG is basically when you are in, for example, a specific company context. You have some documents that you want to search over, or you want essentially, the biggest problem with LLMs today is usually hallucination, right? It says stuff that are false and it says it very confidently, and this is actually a huge problem. What RAG does is it kind of circumvents this. Basically what it does is that it takes your documents, your company context, whatever it is, and conditions on that. So it's making sure that it's retrieving knowledge directly from your company context. And this can be in two ways. One is extractive, where it is literally receiving the chunk of the document that is relevant and sending it to you. Another way is abstractive. So you see the example that I've created on the side, which is just ChatGPT. Sometimes it has these links on the side. That's what RAG is. And it is re-summarizing it, regenerating it in a different way. And that's kind of abstractive RAG as opposed to extractive RAG. So that's all it stands for. It was really popular about a year ago. It is still really popular now, but it's more commonly used as a concept. And the other word that you need to know in this context is MCP, Model Context Protocol. How many of you guys know what this is? Thumbs up and down. Okay, a lot of thumbs up, a lot of thumbs down, about 50-50. Cool. So what is MCP? Model Context Protocol. It's this word that you will hear a lot when you're doing anything with agents. It is basically a language with which an LLM, which is, for example, a chatbot, uses to interface with any external tool you have. So in this case, you see Slack, Google Drive, GitHub, could be Gmail, could be anything else, could be even a database of your own documents, etc. And the key thing here that made agents actually easy to use is basically it's a way for your LLM to connect with the outside world. Originally, before MCP, kind of on the left side of this, you see that actually each individual third-party app, for example, Slack or Drive or GitHub or something like this, each had to have their own connection to the LLM, and this would work half the time. Let's say OpenAI updates to ChatGPT 5.2, it would break, etc., and this leads to a whole host of problems. MCP is basically a common language with which anybody who has any third-party app can interface with an LLM. And this is not even one LLM, right? Because OpenAI, Claude, Gemini, pretty much all of the LLMs all use MCP. So because this is a common standard, it is very easy for any model you have to plug into any app in the outside world. And it's also possible for you to create your own custom MCP service. So let's say at your company, you have a service that you really want to connect to your LLM. The way that you do that is through MCP. Hopefully that made sense. I just saw some folks in the chat. MCP, the AI version of an API. Very interesting. Yeah, that sounds about right. It's more you can think of as like a language that connects one to the other. So in some way, kind of an API that connects external services to LLMs. All right. Now I'm going to go over very briefly a couple of the tools that we'll touch on in the next few minutes. One of them, OpenAI Agent Builder. How many of you guys have seen this? Yes, no. Some folks using it. No, not yet. All right. So OpenAI just launched Agent Builder. This is about a month ago, so it's quite new. These things are always coming up time after time, so I'm sure by the next time we teach this course, there'll be another one that's added to this list. But OpenAI Agent Builder is basically, if you are using, for example, ChatGPT, which it feels like most people are, or if you're using Claude or something like this, each of these services have their own different agent builders. With OpenAI specifically, what you will see are these kind of flows, and these are really common for agentic workflows in general. So whenever you're creating an agent, what you will need to actually do, instead of writing the code to create an agent, which is kind of painful and annoying, you could just use these kind of workflow maps and these kind of digital drag and drop UI tools that basically connect different things together. And what you have are a lot of these if-then conditional flows, like if this happens, then this should happen, then that should happen, then this should happen. So this procedural sequential thinking is the basis of everything that you do with actually creating agents. Now, another one, and you can see this workflow map that looks quite similar, is called N8N. So how many of you guys have heard of N8N? Lot more thumbs up there, some thumbs down. Okay, cool. N8N, Zapier, Make.com, they're all in the same class, right? OpenAI Agent Builder is because they also own the model, so it makes it really easy to plug into, for example, OpenAI models. N8N, you can see here at the bottom, you can still plug into an OpenAI model, but you can also plug into any other model as well, not from that ecosystem. And it is basically kind of an MCP connector. It connects models to things that you can do with the models with pieces of logic. It's actually very similar. So once you learn how to do one, you learn really how to do it for any workflow. And what I would recommend is really specializing in one of them. All of them are going to catch up. The speed of development in this area is so fast that I think it actually makes sense to be a specialist than a generalist. So try a bunch of them, figure out what works for you. If you have specific requirements, I'm super happy to answer over LinkedIn or email what I think makes sense, but I'm sure you will figure it out. And then other kinds of agents are those integrated in tools. So what I might show you right now is kind of an agent in Slack. Of course, there are agents also in Teams and a whole bunch of these other communication platforms. But what's super interesting about things like Slack is that based on a certain action happening with a third-party tool, for example, as a developer, there might be a GitHub PR request, or I might get an email, like a support email sent to this specific place, or this spreadsheet might get updated, and I want someone to be notified because of it. but directly in my own platform, and I want this third action to be taken, or I want a channel to be created to respond to this incident, which is a bug or an outage or something like this, all of that can happen even within Slack, and those are called workflows. And I see a question in the chat. Can a non-technical person build an agent, from Dennis? Are we at that point? 100% we are at that point. And hopefully by the end of this session, or at least by the end of the week, even tomorrow, my challenge to you is you go and create one of these things that we work on today yourself. Even if what it is just replicating something that we do right now in the next 10 minutes, it's I think all of you can do it. So then we have one more tool that I would love to show you. So no one needs to, okay, I wouldn't say no one needs to be a web developer anymore. We still do need web developers, but all of you can also be web developers, at least to some level, with tools kind of like Lovable. And so Lovable is super nice because what you can do is just ask it to create a web app for you. And there are other tools that you can learn about also on Skole, for example, Bubble or Webflow or things like this, where you can create mobile apps just from a prompt, right? The whole point of this is that you actually have what it really took someone like years of school to learn at your fingertips right now. And the best way to conquer this kind of stuff is, one, really start getting your hands dirty, experiment with it, try it yourself. Second, understand procedural thinking, because really what the skill is to succeed in this era is breaking down a large task into sequential step-by-step instructions that either build on each other, or given something, how do you want to change it to the thing that you have? How do you describe the thing that you want in a really, really concrete way? All of those are the skills that I think are going to be super important in the age of agents. All right. And lastly, another kind of agentic workflow is kind of what you've seen with Gemini Actions or ChatGPT Tasks. Essentially, you're able to say, hey, I would love for you to to notify me every Monday that something like that, for example, the weather is rainy, about like how rainy it is and therefore what I need to update in the store. Or for example, I want a recap of the news, but I want it to be on a weekly basis at 9 a.m. From there, it can be mapped to scheduled actions and tasks. And it can either, for example, send you an email or something like this. Mostly right now, what they're doing is sending you notifications through their own app. But it's also really, really interesting and kind of a new way to receive messages from an AI. So now we're kind of going to go into a bunch of very, very practical examples. And then maybe some of you guys have your own practical examples. The question is, are these free for all? Do we need to have memberships? So a bunch of these are free. For OpenAI, I think you need to put like $5 or $10 in your account. For N8N, there's a free trial. For all of them, there's free trials. And then you see what works for you. Unfortunately, I don't know if there's one that is like fully free. N8N is free until a certain extent, but once you build a nice agent, it starts becoming unfree fairly quickly. Cool. So an example that you might see later in the course, so this is a little bit of foreshadowing, is about a cosmetics company. And what they have is kind of, let's say, a flow. For example, we have a company in any domain. What they want to do is collect a lot of market research, turn those market research into actual practical insights, and from those insights generate product ideas, and then send them to humans to see whether these are good product ideas or bad ideas. And normally for this company, like they do this, actually it's a real life example that you'll hear about a bit later on. They do this once a quarter and they have several meetings and they have a whole team dedicated to doing the research and the insights. And we can make this work hopefully in the next 10 minutes. So let's take a look. Now, which tool would you like to use to do this? There's a bunch of different tools that you could use. For this, I'm going to start with Agent Builder, and then we'll work through a couple of the different tools that you have for different types of examples. So how do you even get to Agent Builder? It's actually not very easy to find, but if you know this URL, it's not so bad. For example, if you go to OpenAI Agent Builder, it's not quite the first link. It gets you to the docs, which kind of explains it a little bit, and then you find the OpenAI Agent Builder. You can read a little bit more about what exactly you can do with this, but instead, let's hopefully just show you. So we, let's say, are going to create a new workflow. And what you see here are a couple of things, and these are common for pretty much every platform where you're generating agents. So at the core, there is something called an agent that you know of as an LLM, right? For example, GPT-5, GPT 4.1, etc., Claude, that's what they're referring to as agents within an agentic workflow. So the vocabulary is a little bit weird, but what's happening is that you have instructions. So this is exactly like what you had as a prompt before when you're, for example, chatting with ChatGPT, and you have the ability to add context. So if you're uploading, for example, a document here, there are some state variables, for example, the name of your company or the context of your company or something like this, you can pass that as context to an agent. And then you can kind of create, for example, from scratch. So you could put some guardrails on the agent where you're like, hey, I would really like my agent not to do this stuff. We need to really make sure there's no personally identifiable information. We should make sure that the models don't go off task, blah, blah, blah. They have a lot of support for doing those kind of things to make sure agents don't go off the rails. And then here's what I meant by MCP. So MCP lets you connect to everything else outside. So for example, you could connect to something like Stripe for getting someone to pay for something. You could connect to Teams if that's what you're using, or Slack. You could connect to Gmail to send an email, Calendar to make a calendar invite, and you can add your own. So any MCP server can be added from whatever product, etc., that you have, and you just need usually an API key or some custom headers. So the normal way that I would suggest creating a workflow is actually not starting from scratch. So in this case, let's say we're starting with data enrichment. So what we wanted to do was summarize a bunch of market research on the web, generate some insights, from there generate some product ideas, and send it to me via email. And so the best way that you could do this, in this case, we're using GPT-5 Mini, or we could use maybe GPT-5 Nano. It's talking about using web search to find information about the following company. Instead, we want to find, for example, research about the following makeup products that we could use to create based on the underlying topic. You can add the context of the company. You can actually rewrite the prompt using AI, and I would really recommend this because it makes your agents much, much, much better. I'm just checking in the chat. Can this approach be applied to social media and other walled gardens? Yes, they should have their own MCP servers. There are data privacy and access issues. Hopefully, they are dealing with it on their side, for example, Meta or Instagram or something like this. Another question, can this be applied to mobile native apps? Yes, but not with, I would say, OpenAI right now. But what's super nice is at the end of this, you actually just get the code. If you have a developer and if you have a mobile app, all you need to do is just put it in. So it's super nice to have that while you're building in a more easy way. So, okay. You have your research agent. You're going to say, hey, you're a helpful assistant. I want to summarize all the market research from the last 2 weeks about makeup and cosmetics. Actually, let's be fair, we could say the last 2 months. About to collect the market research about blah, blah, blah. We could say low reasoning effort. For tools, we could say web search. Like, we actually want you to go out to the web and find this information. Okay. Then we wanted to put this research together in a nice display. We want the 5 key insights from all the information. Now, when you're working on an agentic process, what I would recommend is debugging step by step. So you have this option here where you can preview your agent. So you can prompt it as if you're the user. You could say, hey, I'm interested in lipstick, for example. And now our web research agent is going to crawl the web. And then our summary agent is going to figure out the summarization of what it thinks are the main values of lipstick that people have found out. What are the most recent trends that people have found out in the last 2 months? Okay, great. This looks good to me. But now what we want from that is another agent that, for example, wants to create actual product ideas based on this. And then another agent. So there's a very interesting step here that I think is actually really important to most of your workflows. And this is called user approval. Usually, especially at the beginning, we don't want to let agents run willy-nilly. We want actually to be a little bit in the loop to understand whether we should approve or reject these kind of ideas that it's proposing, or before it sends an email to somebody else. Super, super important. And the way that you can do this is user approval. This is basically a concept from the research community called human in the loop computing. So from here, instead of creating this new node, we can plug into user approval. So it's really just like the flow charts, what if charts that you're used to before. And you could say, hey, this is a good summary. Is this a good summary? And if not, maybe you want to do some more research and then summarize again. Or is it all right? So if they rejected, we want to do a bit more research. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit such that it's still easier to see. Reject, then do this again. Otherwise, if we approve, then maybe what we want to do is have an MCP server, which, for example, sends an email. And we would want to, let's say, get your access token. So maybe we could authorize our API to do so. There's also an easier way to do this. Like, for example, if we just say connect. So they've changed it a little bit. There is an API token, which is a little bit annoying for you guys to find. But if we are, for example, trying to find this from email, what you could see is that to get your access token, what you would like to do is select, for example, several different responsibilities that you could have. For example, we are okay with sending emails and you have to approve this. And then you say, hey, this is fine for me. I would like all of these APIs, for example. We can select, hey, it's okay for me to do Gmail or mail. And then approve it. But this is actually not so nice. So in this case, we could say, okay, yeah, we're fine with the Gmail API and it's blocked for some reason. We'll double check what's going on here. But for example, with N8N and with other tools, it's actually much easier. All you have to do is log into your Google account. And this is how it used to be here. I wonder if Google is trying to block OpenAI such that Gemini is actually working a little bit better with these kind of things. But there are other email accounts, other ways to send messages as well. Yeah, exactly. You never know. These things change like every day because they're all trying to get people to use their version of it. Also, by the way, Google just launched their own agents platform, which is super, super interesting. It's actually really bad, but it's getting better. Yeah, code red by OpenAI. Yeah, I don't know if you've heard about this news, but OpenAI's usage went down 6%, and Google Gemini's usage went up about 10% in the same time frame. So now they're all freaking out and just trying a bunch of stuff. Anyway, that's the word on the street about what's happening with these folks. So, okay, let's say you approve, and it goes to another agent, which says, I would like to summarize these. I want 3 concrete new ideas for products in cosmetics based on these insights. Cool, we could say 1 nano. Now, if you look at more, there's a lot of really interesting things you could do here. Temperature basically says, so how many of you guys know what temperature is? Some folks, a lot of no's. Okay, so temperature basically lets you see how creative you want your model to be. Like if you really wanted to follow your instructions, you should have a low temperature. And if you really wanted to not follow your instructions and be super excitable, create a high temperature. Max tokens is like how long you want your response to be. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff here. We can get into it a little bit more. I'm always happy to talk about it. Whether you want your output format to be a text or a JSON, and now they're experimenting with something called a widget, which is kind of like a UI. JSONs are usually nice for developers because they can process it much easier than text that might show up in different formats. So you could consider it in that way if you're working with a larger development team. And here you go. So you have, let's say, an agent. I want 3 concrete new ideas for products. And now following our advice, we kind of preview each of these, but you can also preview each agent individually as well. So there's this option to kind of evaluate and see how the traces are working. And with evaluate, you can have some, for example, use cases, right? Like I have this example, it should show up like this at the end, and I want to see it go through it and come out with it at the end, for example. So in this case, we're looking at this agent. Let's say we want information about lipsticks. It's going to search the web, hopefully. It says snapshot of the global lipstick landscape, including segments, trends, growth drivers, and competitive dynamics. But it doesn't look at any company website and it doesn't have any insights. So we say, hey, this is actually a terrible summary. So what it's going to do is, again, look at, and it's doing quite badly. So what's important is that you really need to test this, because even though it worked really well the first time, the second time it doesn't work so well. So if I can tell you anything, it's really, really important that you test each one of these steps individually and then get it to continue. Now, we're going to play a little bit of a game, which is what agent tool would you use for each of these scenarios? So in this case, what is the right agent tool to do this? Could use N8N, you could use OpenAI Agent Kit, which is what we were showing you. You could use Make.com, or you could use Zapier, and really the right answer is whatever you're most comfortable with. But we just looked at an example to try to do it through OpenAI Agent Kit. But now there are also a lot of different other tasks. For example, sending scheduled messages. Does anyone have an idea of what tool they would use to do a task like this? If you have a suggestion in the chat, go for it. Slack, N8N, OpenAI Agent Kit is all I know about. Yeah, fair. So you can see that there's a lot of different ways to do this, and all of them can do it. And I also noted some comments in the chat which were a little bit scared. So I think I did throw you a little bit in the deep end there about how to get into this. And maybe all of this will become a little bit clearer after breaking down your workflows into these step-by-steps to understand exactly how to do this. But this is not requiring necessarily technical knowledge. It is something that you can just do by understanding what you would like to do. And maybe the easiest way for me to show you that is through something like N8N. So in this case, what they've built, and I'm pretty sure OpenAI and Gemini will also come out with it, and some folks were saying, oh, you could prompt ChatGPT or you could prompt Copilot with Microsoft to get the steps that you need to break down a workflow. This is fair, but those tools don't actually know that much about each of these different parts of the workflow. So they could say something that might not be actually true about how you would like to do it. Also, the knowledge state, they're looking for kind of literature, and these tools are coming out very, very recently. So there's not really that many blog posts, etc., about how to do this well, because everything keeps changing almost every day or every few days. But what you have on N8N is actually something super helpful, which is trying an AI workflow. So here you could kind of, again, start with a template, or if you go here and you say, hey, I want to create a workflow, there's this option called Build with AI. And you could say, so in this case, for the free mode, there's 20 credits. So you have about 20 tries to create the agent that you would like. But you're able to say, hey, this is what I would like to do. And it will build a workflow for you. So does someone have an example of what they would like to see as an agent? I know you guys have not done the mapping agentic workflows yet, but I'm curious if any of you have a feeling of like, I want to walk away from this course creating this specific agent. If that was there in my life, it would be way better. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of responses come up. Okay, I see scrap OneNote pages for project status and project updates. So I don't have, for example, a OneNote page to start with, but what we can do is point to, for example, any publicly visible page. And I think you can do this with either a OneNote, for example, MCP, or just making the publicly visible and allowing them to scrape it. So what we could say is, I would like to scrape a set of, let's say in this case, Wikipedia pages, because it's a little bit easier, and get project status updates. And in this case, we could say on actually, we want something where there are some nice like tickets of items, because that is really what helps with these kind of project status updates. But let's say we could say, so maybe we would like to scrape a set of Wikipedia pages on space travel, because those are ongoing projects and they have a lot of updates. And get project status updates and summarize this in a project summary and send it to me by email. I will specify which links to scrape, for example. And you can describe it pretty much exactly like this in natural language and see what happens. And now what you see clearly is that, okay, first it will try to understand what the prompt is, then think about the best practices. This kind of reasoning process is very common these days. That's what it's kind of called behind the scenes. And each of these, you can also think of them as behind the scenes. They are using agents to break down your prompt into step-by-step processes. So let's see from there. Cool. So now we see that it's broken down our process already into several nodes, and now it's trying to figure out how I should structure it. Okay, it's realized maybe I want to use an OpenAI model. I can always switch that. What the output should look like, how I should summarize it. Is there a notion of memory? First, get the URLs, split them, fetch the Wikipedia pages, then extract, blah, blah, blah. Now, I think it's making it a little bit more complicated than it has to be, because what it could do is just have an agent that's browsing the web. Instead, it's using kind of the web tool to go fetch the pages. And it says, okay, there's a couple of things that are not set yet. Credentials for Gmail. So here, hopefully, it's a little bit easier. Or maybe this is also Google making it a little bit more difficult. Okay, no. They allow you to sign in, at least with this. So we say, okay, it's fine. You can send me an email from my own account. It's okay. So that's all you have to do to get it to work, which is how it used to work with OpenAI. And now what you want. So what's super nice about N8N, which I think is super important, is that it lets you debug step by step. So in this case, you want to see that for each step, what part makes sense. And right now it's telling us that there's already still a problem with workflow configurations. It needs, for example, an array of Wikipedia URLs for us to put in our information. But this is, let's say, not exactly what we wanted. We want it to ask us what the URLs are, for example, via chat. So in that case, what's super nice, again, about N8N, and what I would really recommend you to try, because it's super, super easy, is ask it to change your agentic workflow. So you could say, hey, I would like you to change the workflow to include to ask me what URLs I would like to use. Now, in the meantime, while this is working, I just wanted to quickly show you, for example, Lovable, because I'm keeping an eye on the clock and we're ticking down. So, how many of you have tried Lovable before? A lot of folks, and some no's, some yeses. Okay, this is actually a very mixed class. So, super excited to show you about Lovable. In this case, like I said, you are basically your own web designer. One thing to be very careful of with something like Lovable, which is using a lot of agents behind the scenes, is that you don't want to pass in company-specific information, things that are private into Lovable. They are a third party. So you want to be very careful about what you're adding, what you're not adding. And this goes for OpenAI, for Gemini, for everything, for N8N as well. You want to be careful about what you're exposing to third-party services, unless your company's already partnered with them, et cetera, and they're not training on your data, and so on. But what Lovable is great for is, for example, let's say you have a team event coming up, and you would love to create a website where people could, for example, upload their own photos and everyone could see it, kind of like a gallery. And you also want, let's say, an agenda about this team outing and maybe a list of things that they should bring. And maybe because we're in Lausanne here in Switzerland, we have a lake and we have the mountains. So let's say we were doing a nice barbecue, something like this. So the nice thing is you could just chat and ask for what you would like. So we could say, hi, I would like a website about a team barbecue where we would like an agenda with what we're doing for the 3 hours that we're there, a list of what we should bring, and I would also like to have a functionality where the people attending could upload their photos and everyone could see their photos. And then we see whether it works. I think it's good enough. So the super nice thing, and I think I would really recommend getting used to doing voice chat with these because it goes a lot faster than actually typing it. And now let's see what's going on over here. To activate the workflow, it says instead of doing the manual trigger, we have a webhook form that collects URLs and email addresses about which URL you want and which email address you can have. And we have a respond to webhook node, blah, blah, blah. And to test it, you can display a URL like this. Okay, cool. So in this case, let's pull up the chat by the side. Let's execute and refine and see how it goes.
Sorry to interrupt, Vinny. I think you stopped sharing your screen.
Oh, really? Sorry about that. So weird. Did that work?
All back, thanks.
All back. Perfect. Cool. So it's waiting for us to call the test URL here. So maybe we go here, and now we see how it works. So in this case with agents, what you would really like to do is be able to kind of create methods, change them, and see how they work. And this is all you have to do. It's not so hard to create the agentic workflows that you would like. Now, let's go over to Lovable. So with Lovable, what's going on is that here's our preview, here's our further instructions. So in this case, we want to enable, for example, let's say always allow. We can say allow cloud. So in this case, what we would like is it's broken down our task, what we've requested, into a hero section, a timeline section, a what to bring checklist, and the photo gallery with upload functionality. The last one is actually quite complicated. And what you would like to do is enable essentially the cloud, which is basically saying, hey, we want you to have a database. We want you to have an LLM to your app. We want you to have all of this. We've auto-approved the cloud access. and now it's creating the database in the back end, it's creating the version of the website. And once this is all ready, hopefully by the end of the session, we'll be able to see this fully functional website that's being powered by agents. Now, one thing that I would love to show you as well is another very cool example of agents while we're waiting for this to run in the backend. So right now, all of this is a little bit slow. It will take 5 minutes. So usually you should just start it, launch it. It does stuff on its own. Grab a coffee, come back, and then it will have created what you would like. But one thing that is super, super interesting as an example of agents is what we've been working on and what you actually have access to, as Andre was mentioning at the beginning of the lesson. So on, for example, app.schoolay.ai, what we're working on is a personalized learning framework. So the more it teaches you, the more it learns about what is effective ways of teaching for you. So your experience on the platform might be very different than somebody else's. But let's say we are, for example, signing up with Google here. There's a bunch of different languages, but what we're asking first is, who are you? What would you like to learn? What are your tools? What are your tasks? What is your context? Which company are you from? The more information you put, the better it is for you. And basically the context is every single little bit of exercise is super hyper contextualized to who you are as a person. But what I wanted to show you is actually what's happening with agents behind the scenes here. We don't really need the tour. But in this case, I had already said that I am working at an energy company as a consultant, and I have a bunch of tools and tasks. And maybe I use Zoom and I use Google Slides, and that's what I use. And it's about, for example, AI foundations, but AI foundations in the context of me being an energy consultant. But what's going on here is that there is an agent that plans the curriculum. There's an agent orchestrator that essentially plans the lesson. And as you kind of go down into the lesson, it decides when to pull a video for you, when to pull an exercise for you, when to pull an interactive exercise. And based on the questions that you ask back, the orchestrator actually understands which agents to pull at the right time. So it is this kind of procedural workflow, but it's evolutionary. In the context, it changes based on what is relevant to you, but is grounded a bit in real materials. For example, RAG. And here with Agent Builder, with N8N, it's not so hard to do RAG. In fact, all it is another MCP. So in this case, if you want to plug, for example, to SharePoint to have the OneNote pages that you would like, or maybe even OneNote exists and has its own MCP server, it's super, super easy. And this is the foundation of RAG. It's drawing from real materials and real documents that you have. So I would encourage you to play around, ask questions back. What's going on behind the scenes here is that there's actually a model that's trying to estimate your misconceptions and your skill levels and trying to decide based on that the right difficulty and modality of the next type of content to show you. So any feedback, super appreciated. If you like it, let us know. If you think something should be changed, let us know as well. But it's also a great example of how agents can work together to create a really cohesive learning experience. So maybe at least as an example, it's cool to play around with. Now, that is kind of a whirlwind tour to what you can do with agents, how you can build stuff on your own. What I would recommend, the easiest way to get started is going from, let's say, we don't need to save this. The easiest way to get started is start from a template and then modify the template. And especially if you're not sure exactly where to start. So for example, if you want a RAG MCP and a search engine MCP, or if you wanted to create a support ticket, there's usually someone who's created a template already that's a little bit relevant to you. And it's way easier to start with a template than starting from scratch, like especially if you know the template already works. So that's what I would recommend starting with. Cool. I see a question about where can you find it? I think it's linked from the NXDL platform already, but I'll link it again in the chat in case you want to play around with Schoolay. And you guys all have access for 4 weeks, I believe. Are the steps documented? Yes. And actually, you will hear a lot about this in all of the lessons to come. So this is just kind of a throw you in the deep end of what actually creating an agent looks like. such that when you start planning your workflows later on, you know exactly, you already have some context of like, oh yeah, I saw Vinny create an agent. I saw it actually work. I know what a template looks like. Like, for example, I want what I would want to do to, for example, talk to Google Sheets with ChatGPT 5. So we could get started for free with N8N Cloud. We could see exactly what this workflow looks like. You get some free OpenAI credits already. All you have to do is just try it out. So in this case, you have a chat, you have a talk to your data modality, and you plug it into your desired Google Sheet. If you have a Google Sheet, try it out. Would be super, super helpful. Now, I think, Andre, it's time for questions, no?
Thanks, Vinny. Yes, you've answered. You're phenomenal. First of all, staying on top of the chat, answering many of the questions there. I think a couple of things just that I'd like to say in response to some of the questions that came up is, as you also mentioned, there's no need for me in this call. You are the facilitator as well. That positioning of there's so much more to come in this course in terms of breaking down your workflow, your use case, using that agent framework, really auditing it, figuring out what the different steps are, where humans interact, where agents interact, and then through all of the tutorials and the activities, really mapping that process out, and then engineering the workflow. How do you navigate all the different regulations and things that go with it? How do you track the impact towards the end? And that's really the purpose of this intensive. And the purpose of this call is giving that sort of fire hydrant introduction really early on to say, this is what we're talking about when we're saying mapping out agents and all the different steps. So to all the questions and anxieties in the chat around being overwhelmed, there being too many tools, where do I start? Like, this is overwhelming. There's a lot to learn here and a lot to take in an hour. But the sort of key takeaway here is building blocks, the different steps, the workflow, understanding that the process has different steps and different things, and agents can support in all of that. So on that note, I think, Vinny, let's quickly just run through what's next, and then I'll get back to you. Maybe you can see if Lovable is then generated, and we can answer a couple of questions there. I see Zelda's got a hand up. So if you don't
maybe
mind,
it is ready. Let's see.
Let's go.
Let's see. So it has created our database. And let's see. I think we might be unlucky. Let's see. Hopefully it will come up as we continue the questions.
Thanks, Vinny. Do you mind quickly stopping sharing your screen, and then I'll just run through a couple of final slides. So in terms of what's next from here, so this is Learning Unit 2. After this, as mentioned a little bit earlier, it's going in and identifying where agentic AI can deliver the most value in your organization, and then selecting a functional area as a starting point for the framework. So with all of this in mind, all of this engineering, the workflows, the mapping, the tools, think about what that process is, what that functional area is in your use, in your context, where agentic AI could add value. And then tomorrow, start that agent framework by mapping out where opportunities may exist as the A part, the audit part of the agent workflow. Before reviewing and refining everything you've done this week, complete any remaining activities ahead of Learning Unit 3 starting on Tuesday. We do understand that this is an intensive 4 days, Tuesday through Friday, with a lot to take in and a lot to get to grips with, which is why we do encourage you to take time to come back and review later on. As always, please continue the conversation in community. Vinny, I'm sure you'll be in there somewhere sharing information. I see you shared an email address in the chat. We'll post that afterwards as well, and answering any questions participants might have. And with that, our live sessions for this week are done, and we will see you all again on Tuesday. We're not yet off to the dashboard. I'm going to stop my screen. Vinny, I'm going to put you in the center, and then I'm going to see Zelda if you would like to ask your question and come on camera.
I just wanted to say it finally worked. So we have the schedule, what to bring, the photo gallery with actually the functionality to actually upload photos, and for example, to actually publish this as a live app right away. So you can, for example, use your own website, or you can auto-generate one. It will give you like a nice grill and grin Lovable app, and now it's actually a public website. So you're able to actually see a website from scratch created in like less than 3 or 4 minutes.
That makes me think the next time we should make a website for this particular live session and then have everyone post their thoughts. Zelda seems to be having trouble. So Ali, I'm going over to you to see if you can turn your camera on and ask your question. Also not. Joseph.
Oh, here we go. Beautiful session today. I really enjoyed that one, Venitria. And
Thank you.
I've been developing our own vibe coding platform specifically actually to outpace Lovable. So I really loved the session today. And what I've been realizing is that the specificity, going back to your point, of your designs are the most critical. And that's what I've been realizing is the main caveat of Lovable, is that they can't decide what web framework that they want to build on. They're building it very proprietarily. That's why we went the WordPress route. And I mean, you wouldn't believe it. We actually had WordPress.org, Matt Mullenweg, and the Automatic team reach out to us personally from California. And we've been realizing that documentation and data are key. And that's why we've been encouraging everybody to build on the WordPress ecosystem. And we're actually creating sites that people can actually own. And that was one of the big issues with Lovable, is that you can't actually permanently own the site and put it around your neck like a blockchain. And that's what we've been doing with our tool, is that you can actually create the app, download the app, put it around a USB and have it in cold storage. And you don't actually have to pay us if you don't wish. And you can give the product to ChatGPT, whoever, Lovable, to continue it. And I think that documentation, that data, going back to Dirk, and the Lovable is a great concept, great Dutch company. Love the work that they're doing, but I think it's so important for people to realize deprecation, and that if you make a site with Lovable, for example, you have to keep going back to Lovable. And so that's also another big point that a lot of people fail to see, is what is the ownership of the content that you're making. And the N8N workflows and some of these agentic ones, you can actually make your own. And that was actually the really cool part, is you can't, like, for anybody in the chat, if you don't know like what N8N workflow to create, just tell the AI your stack and tell it to create the N8N workflow for you. Because oftentimes it's so stack specific that if you download an N8N and you put it into another one, it might not work. It actually might break your tool. And if your tool is broken, you might not know how to debug it. So I think going at a slow pace for everybody, I think that's the big encouragement, is just go slow. Figure out who your customer is, figure out exactly what you want to build, and don't be afraid just to build on that stack. Because, for example, we don't want to build websites for anybody else. We hate Wix, we hate Weebly, Squarespace, we hate them all, because you don't own the content. That's just the direction we're going. We could be absolutely false, but it's really helped with clarity. And I love the NCP context that you've been having. The big question, I guess, the only question I had with NCP is that, does over-integratability deprecate plugins over time? If you try to overly integrate into everything, how do you know what's breaking your tool? That's one big issue I've been having, is over-integration, trying to not over-integrate. And I'll stop talking.
Let me interrupt there. Apologies for that. We are out of time. Vinny, would you like to respond very quickly to that?
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. You want to use your stack, you want to own the code, but what's super nice about these kind of tools, Lovable aside, like pretty much every one of them lets you download the code and run it locally. So it is a little bit less friendly, but you can do it without Lovable, even if you construct it on Lovable.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you just have
But yeah, MCP is great. Over integration is a problem. So be careful. Things are new, but try everything and then go from there.
Thank you, Vinny, and thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for today's session. The recording will be available a couple of hours. We're just processing it. There was a question in the chat about access. Vinny, you mentioned 4 weeks for Scholé. Just a sort of reminder that the course access is a month after the course, so that's 20 January, and I'm sure Vinny and the team are more than happy to
yeah, the same.
Scholé access as well. So that will
Yes,
continue.
yes, exactly. Sorry.
No worries at all. Thank you so much. Good luck with your audit phase of your workflow. We look forward to hear all about it next week when we meet on Tuesday to hear from Dirk and Ola more about that agentic frame, the agent framework, and diving deeper into it. But Vinny, thank you so much. As always, a pleasure. So much to take in, so much to process over the weekend. We thank you for your time, and thank you all of our participants for being here. Vinny, final words on all of this before we close.
Yeah, try it yourself. I think it is actually, I know it might have looked a little bit intimidating, but you can do it. It's just drag and drop. Try it yourself. At least just run one of the templates from scratch just to prove to yourself you can run an agent.
Very well said. Thank you so much. And thanks, everyone. I will now send us all back to the dashboard. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a wonderful Thursday. And thank you for joining us in this session. Thank you.